This is Gerardo Del Real with Resource Stock Digest. Joining me today is the president and CEO of what is still named Nevada Sunrise Gold, Mr. Warren Stanyer. Warren, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for your call.
Thanks for taking the call and thanks for your time today. You had some news this morning that the market has received pretty well. You're up some 30% today on pretty substantial volume given, the overall market sentiment that we have right now. And I joked about Nevada Sunrise Gold still being the name. And, clearly there's still value there from the gold exposure that the 20% interest in Kinsley Mountain, which we'll see drilling later this year, provides. But let's be absolutely clear that the main driver of value right now is the lithium. Look, I looked over the release and I looked over the targets, and I got to tell you, Warren, what stood out to me is these kilometer wide step outs. Those kind of step outs don't usually happen this early on in a project's life cycle. And I like the fact that it at least looks like you believe that you have the goods, at the very least with the clay. So I'd love for you to provide some context on this morning's release.
Well, thanks, Gerardo. So when we got the preliminary geophysics back, and we're still fine-tuning that, but we could clearly see that there's certain areas that we need to go in, certain directions, that is, to the north, to the west, and that's where the drill spacing is a little tighter, but it's still pretty wide. I mean, it's looking at holes 5 and 6, they're a kilometer apart. From 4 to 5 is probably more than almost a kilometer and a half or a kilometer and a quarter. In miles, a mile is 1.5 kilometers for our American listeners. So they are widely spaced. The objective of this program is to see how far these clay horizons go. And we're not even moving towards the east yet. There's so much territory to cover, and the permit will allow you a certain amount of disturbance. So that's why we've concentrated on the western half of the property at this time.
I like the fact that you distributed drill tenders for the project. I like the plurality of it, meaning you're obviously in discussions with multiple drillers. I know there tends to be a shortage in Nevada around this time of the year, but it sounds like you feel pretty optimistic that you at the very least have some pretty compelling offers on the table. Can you speak to that at all?
Well, it's early on. I mean, people have just received the documents, but some of the feedback we're getting is that there are drills potentially available. So our permitting, we feel, will follow a pretty specific timeline. We hope to have a permit, say, by the 1st of August, which is coincident with when we expect to receive the tenders back, or these proposals from these drill companies. So that's kind of working in tandem, the waiting for both of those. So yeah, then it's full speed ahead. Redo the bond because we have 10 new drill sites, and if the driller can get out there before the end of the month of August, then that's exactly what we want.
You mentioned the TDEM, right? The surveys that you're still, processing data from and that you're still interpreting, but clearly you have enough confidence in the targets you selected based on the early interpretation of what you've seen thus far. Is that accurate there, Warren?
Yes. I mean, we see large conductive zones. And so how they tie together, it's tricky with the 3 data sets we have. We had 2 contractors in 2016, and those meshed fairly well. Now we have a 2022 survey that was performed by one of those contractors from 2016. So there's 3 data sets, and I think we discussed this before, that there's some changes that have occurred in processing and coding for these computer processing, making the models. I mean, this is way beyond my pay grade. That's the challenge that we have, is making everything mesh. But in the meantime, we can clearly see the conductive zones that are revealed by the new lines. So that's what helped us pick these targets. And if we have to move some around in a few months, we can do another amendment. So, but right now, we believe we have what we need to see the extent of the clay. And if we drill through that clay and into some brine layer, well, then we get 2 for 1.
Well, then it's off to the races. And I know that your phone has already been ringing with, some much bigger names in terms of market cap and in terms of how far advanced these companies' projects are. I'll speculate that you likely don't want to get into that aspect of the conversation, but this is going to be a very, very important drill program for shareholders. It's clear to me that several people sold, shares to at the very least in their mind, try to participate in the financing that you just completed here. It looks like that's drying up, and I couldn't be more excited about the drills turning potentially here in the next month or so. Anything to add to today's news, Warren?
Well, I mean, you alluded to something. There are sort of bigger powers at work here. I've had some calls and had a good conversation last week with some people with ties to Washington that, I mean, there's a big push on in the United States for critical metals and for domestic production and not being at the mercy of foreign powers when it comes to lithium, rare earths, and nickel, all of these things that we need for this electrified future. So it's quite interesting, the people that are sort of knocking on the door and want to talk about the future. And, I have a vision for this project. I can see that some kind of a lithium mining operation with a solar zone beside us that's generating all the electricity, electric trucks going to and from. It's just like the cover of a popular science magazine from the 1960s, because that's what we dreamed the future would be. So there's a lot of people lining up and starting to realize this, and that's what some of those calls are about.
The infrastructure is excellent. The potential for large tonnage as it relates to the clay is excellent. You're right next to it. When I say right next to, y'all could look at the map, folks. the Bureau of Land Management Gold Point Solar Energy Zone. I have to imagine that this tiny $18 million market cap isn't going to last very long. And as a very biased shareholder who has written checks for the gold and the lithium, I couldn't be more excited to see the drills turning. And then, frankly, we'll have this discussion another day, Warren. I'm really looking forward to seeing what some of the other lithium projects in the portfolio have to show here in the not too distant future. But obviously Gemini, the flagship for the time being. Warren, thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you, Gerardo.
Hey everybody, Gerardo Del Real here. If you're enjoying the content that you just saw, you can let us know in 3 simple steps. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and please share across your network and on social media. Take care, everybody.